This is where the rubber hits the road. And it's important to understand this isn't a one and done type of thing. It's not like I can sit down, create an integration strategy and call it a day. These are things that we need to be thinking about all the time as we think about how we provide better support to our clinicians to serve the patient. First thing is to assess your readiness. What have you got and what is it you're trying to accomplish? What are the pain points that we're really trying to solve here? Physicians and nurses are important members of the patient care team. There may be some other pain points. There may be reimbursement issues that we're having when we look at quality initiatives that are going on. You need to sit down and figure out, with the workflows we have now, what is a roadmap that we could enhance those with integrations? What does success look like? What is my outcome supposed to be? What am I trying to get to with this? So you can actually have some KPIs and understand what you're doing. Finally, governance is just so crucial. I think about 2 projects that stretched on for months and stumbled at the finish line because they had not gotten all the stakeholders involved at the beginning of the project. Stakeholders are going to be key to the success of a new workflow, a new integration strategy that you're implementing. And then you get to the end of it and you're like, well, we're not going to do that. Well, you've just wasted all that time on your roadmap. So you really want to make sure that you've got buy-in up front and you've got people that are steering the organization engaged and supportive of your strategy.
I went on site at several organizations reviewing their IT strategies. They all talked about their governance, but there was one site in particular. It was just so different when they talked about their governance because you could see it. Many of those organizations, I met with an IT leader and a nurse leader, but this other organization, I went into a room and they had their CIO plus the physician leadership, plus the nurse leadership, plus several operational leaders, and then people underneath them. And they all provided feedback on the governance structure with their communication technology. There's not just one department that's responsible for communication. That's why so many of these IT rollouts fail to truly address the breadth of problematic miscommunications that happen within a healthcare system. Because, well, frankly, your governance structure is lean for how overarching the problem is and how much governance you've dedicated to it.
If I'm trying to solve your pain point and not talking to you about it, I'm probably not going to be very successful at that. The organization had the people that were closer to the actual pain points engaged in the conversation, along with the people who are actually having to do the work of implementing the solution. You're going to get to a much better solution there. The places that we can trip up is the technical complexity. We want to reduce those integration points and understand them as well as possible. Sometimes you can't reduce them, but at the very least, you can at least document them and make sure that all of them are being accounted for, because the ones you miss are going to be the ones that end up causing you problems. Some of these workflows can be disruptive, and if they're not vetted out properly, they can cause more problems than they solve. So you want to make sure that you're phasing those in, that you have a good pilot site, ideally with some people that are going to stress the workflow properly so that you've got it vetted before you get it out in the hands of everybody. You're going to want to manage your system load and the redundancy. It's easy to forget that everything that we do has overhead, and overhead is something that will sneak up on you. You may think that everything's going fine, and then you get to the breaking point and all of a sudden everything's not going fine anymore. Slow adoption. Everybody's got a million things they're working on. So you can't just say, well, I mentioned it one time, here it is. Don't you remember 6 months ago when I told you this was coming? Because that's also a recipe for failure. You've got to engage stakeholders early, and you've got to continue to keep them engaged. You've got to make sure your leadership understands what it is you're trying to do, how it's going to benefit your staff, and make sure that they're supporting you along the way and that you're keeping them happy and aware of what's going on. You want to make sure that you're able to show your success. And there's a number of different ways to do that. You can look at response time, the lab response, and radiology. If you have a count of your existing alerts, you may be able to do a future state count and find out how you're reducing the messaging to your staff and how that's getting improved. Time savings and cost reduction are always popular ROIs. Sometimes message volume going up can be a bad thing, but sometimes it can be a good thing as well. It's one of those things that you have to intelligently think about what it is you're measuring. But in general, it usually is good to see that you're getting better utilization as long as it's not accompanied by complaints from the staff. There can be other pain points that can be used. A lot of this gets back to the original pain points that you had, which is why you started this process to begin with. Did you have reimbursement challenges? Are you seeing better reimbursement? Did you have maybe some satisfaction score challenges, either with your patients or your staff, that you were trying to improve? And have those gone up? There's really an infinite number of ways that these can be measured. The more creative we can be with this, the more we can differentiate with our new integration. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Depending on the integration, it makes a huge difference. The payroll integration, we had providers not wanting to log their time off in two different places. They would get talking to from their leadership when they would make the requests in order to build the schedule in Lightning Bolt, and then not actually have the PTO hours docked on the Chronos side. So by fixing that with the integration, now Lightning Bolt just pushes that and automatically loads all that PTO time for them. But any integration like that takes dual entry off the table for physicians is always a good thing.
Many organizations were still relying on the nurse to toggle in and off and actually update their own assignment. And that often led to someone being pinged or someone forgetting to turn that off during the handoff. Lots of instances where physicians or nurses were being reached out to, or it was going to the wrong device. When you think about having that connected to a robust scheduling solution, it really helps facilitate the adoption. Will it turn around nurse burnout? Honestly, nurse burnout is such a problem. There's so many factors that go into it. An organization really just has to say, okay, we can't solve all of this, but where can we find like these 1% tweaks that will just get us a 1% win and just always be trying to improve? That's what organizations do when they look at physician burnout and retention, as well as nurse burnout. It really is just another one of those things you can do to further improve the experience. When I think of the integration about the embedded workflow, that's the other piece where we really see the physician satisfaction jump, because they're moving from communication to an order to going back to checking a note, and keeping them within the same solution is tremendous for their satisfaction. I think the first thing that people are expecting is a reduction in redundant communications, where things that are attached to a middleware can actually say, okay, we have hard rules that have been programmed in, but now that even with those rules, now we have technology that can further deduplicate and further streamline some of the routing and make it easier to create rules and to facilitate that. Instead of you having to hard code certain rules into that technology, the potential is here for a smart tool. One of the things people are using Gen AI for a ton of now is starting to, hey, tell me how to code this, how to build this, how to create this formula within this solution. It can really streamline some of that change management and the lift on the actual provider organization. If you've adopted a very robust scheduling solution you've already been leveraging artificial intelligence, you're already moving into some of that generational AI technology that's being pulled out. It's touching it in a bunch of different places. The most obvious one, ambient speech, being able to say, open up that chat with this physician and send them this alert, forward that alert to X.
There's lots of promises held with AI, as everyone recognizes, but it's wise to approach this with some cautious optimism, right? Make sure that it's rolled out correctly. The ambient speech is the one that's the furthest along with AI that we're seeing in terms of adoption. And these other things are more concepts and theories that we're watching to see when they start to become live and we can start validating those.
We've got a couple of things in the pipeline where we're working with other vendors to see how we can solve the problem where you have a single activation, you have multiple downstream clinical communication systems, and different user populations are on for different reasons because of the functionality that they offer. We want to break down that silo and make it where the right people know about these events.
If you think about what TEFCA is doing for patient document exchange, that does not exist for physician messaging or physician communication back and forth at a national level. Vendors are great. They're always willing to jump in, work out a specific workflow and connect something and help a provider sort that out. What most providers are really asking for when they bring that up, that national infrastructure that needs to exist, that it's actually secure and not suspect, is a very tricky thing to create at a national level. Considering how long TEFCA's been in the works, it would be great, but it just seems like a long road to getting to something like that for applications.
Getting scoping done early. So having the meetings, if there's something that you actually want to connect, to take the time to get on the call and actually understand what you're getting into, where the data is going to go, how we're going to connect it, any off requirements that might be needed. Better to have that conversation early in case any work needs to be done to do better support that integration, rather than pushing everything to the side, saying, okay, now we're ready to start this integration, and now we have all this dev work that needs to come in that has to be backlogged in the roadmap somewhere.
A communications purchase should be a communications consolidation process. The same way organizations look at that EHR saying, we're going to be able to standardize these things. Communication decisions, the smart organizations look at those the same way. A reduction in third-party solution. Look at what you're currently using first and try and push and leverage that and build consensus around things. There's probably tools already at your organization where you need to say, let's use more of this, or think through that workflow you could address with your governance. And thus you are reducing silos without actually adding cost. When you look at your next communication purchase, the days of saying, we're going to buy this communication thing to address this one point, it's off the table. You really have to say your next purchase, or even if you're just going to reevaluate your current technology stack, you need to clearly identify which are the vendors that can span the most pieces and actually drive consolidation for you.